Hey guys, Pablo from Real Street Performance. Today we're going to be doing a teardown on my personal Honda B Series engine. This comes out of my Acura Integra, making well over 800 horsepower for several years now. So we're going to tear into it, see if we can refresh it before the next event, and see what we find along the way. So for this particular setup, it's an LS VTEC, which means non-VTEC block, VTEC cylinder head. Put together, it's an 89mm stroke with an 84mm bore. It uses a set of flat top Arius pistons, which with this combination, it's about 10.5 to 1 compression. Has some I-beam connecting rods, and then a set of Skunk 2 Pro 1 camshafts that have been in the engine for quite some time now. For the turbocharger, we do have a forward-facing turbocharger, just like most of these types of cars have, but what's unique about it is its position in the headlight. Whitfield makes this Integra-specific turbo manifold that makes the turbo right there in that prime location, which, talking about the turbo, it's a Precision 6466 Next Gen, and it just makes all the steam without a lot of back pressure. It's awesome. Now, obviously, we do monitor things like oil pressure and fuel pressure, but more importantly, for the life of the engine, we also monitor coolant pressure. And throughout the last couple passes, we saw increments rising of coolant pressure past the pass, especially on the last one when we got to about 22 pounds of coolant pressure. To compare, on a normal run, we were used to seeing about 16 or 17 psi of coolant pressure, and as we saw an increase, we noticed that there might be something like a lifted head or the head gasket is getting tired. This is an O-ringed engine, so it is something that we can service throughout time, and we want to go ahead and get that taken care of before the next event. Now, it is important to note that we didn't have any overheating problems. The engine still ran great at the end of the last pass. We drove it onto the trailer and around the pits without an actual huge issue. But before we encounter a huge issue, we'd like to tear into it, look at it, and refresh it. That way we have peace of mind and we know that everything is running nice and safe. Also important, coolant pressure. If you guys aren't already monitoring it, it is an important thing to look at, especially if you encounter something at the track where you lift the head and you might have the potential for fluid to get all over your tires. It's very important to look at things like that, not only for the life of the engine, but your safety on the track. Let's go ahead and start tearing into this right now. We're gonna pull the head off, take the bottom end apart, and look at all the components. I wanna look at the valve lash of how it was living because we had some misshift problems in the past, and that might have caused some issues or increased some of the valve lash. So I want to look at that before we fully tear it apart. Okay, so on the exhaust side of things, we have a little bit of variance, a couple thousands across the board, but nothing crazy. On the intake side, we do have quite a bit of additional clearance from what we needed. So I think it's 8 to 10 thousandths. I'll put it on the screen. It's what Skunk 2 recommends for the valve lash on this. We're at over 20, about 22, 23, over 20, 19, 17, 19, 20, 20, and 20. Over 20, over 20, over 20. So there's quite a bit of extra valve lash, and that could be a couple things, but what I believe it is through the misshifts, you have the ability for the keepers to start to pull in through the retainers. So if you have a situation where you shift incorrectly or you go into the wrong gear, it's prone to happen, especially on the intake side. So I think we're gonna find some stuff once we pull the valve train out and we can look at the actual keepers and stuff. So let's go ahead and continue tearing down. Well, that's cool. There's like a little indentation where the O-ring from the top of the sleeve like squishes against the head gasket. So this is an O-ring style head gasket with an standard MLS head gasket with an O-ring on the top of the sleeve. There's a couple different ways that they run combustion sealing for these types of engines. For Hondas, a very, very popular method is either O-ring in the block or O-ring in the head, and then it kind of just squishes against the MLS. Like you can see it had that relationship right there. In the 2Js, it's very common for them to actually just have a solid ring, like a fire ring as they refer to it, that sits there, and then with the ring sitting on top of the sleeve, you have an open area around the bore on the head gasket, which is usually a single piece design out of copper, and then that seals to the cylinder head. So it's a little bit different versus what we're seeing right here. Both methods are good. I think that the higher horsepower guys tend to go for the fire ring one for advanced sealing, and then this is kind of what we've been just doing in this program, and it's worked pretty good as long as we service it. Now, getting these out is going to require a really fine pick, and this comes from a solid piece of wire. We just buy it in a large quantity in a roll, and then we cut it to length. So we're gonna have to remove these and tap in some new wire. So when the fresh head gasket goes on, then we can have a fresh combustion seal. Most of the head gasket looks pretty good. I don't see any blowout sections. It could have just been that after some time, it just needed a little bit of love. But typically you'll see some like tracing of exhaust leaving if it were something very severe. But like I was saying, we were seeing small increments, nothing catastrophic. So this is just time. It's been on the engine for a very long time. So it's you know, due for a refresh. Looking at this stuff, just at first glance, the bottom end is super smooth. There's no binding, nothing of that nature. So although we're gonna use a dial indicator to check the crankshaft, off of initial thoughts like this, I would imagine the crankshaft still to be pretty true and not have any bend to it. But there is something cool or something to note right here on cylinder 3, which it does look like we had some valve contact at some point. Like I said, this engine has been misshifted in the past, and I don't know if this was from a previous occurrence and the engine had been taken apart at that time and serviced or not, or if this is something new, but I'll look at the valves to see. But right here, there is a small dish indentation on the top section of the piston. So that's definitely something to note and to look at, and we'll see if there's a matching stamp on the cylinder head or on the valve itself. So we've got some brake cleaner, since it's a very thin liquid, just kind of in place right there. And then we have an open port on the back of my intake manifold, some compressed air. All right, we're gonna try it now with all of the combustion chambers filled with brake cleaner. So before we continue, I wanted to show you guys something about cleaning on the crankshaft. Now this obviously B series crankshaft. This right here is a K series crankshaft for reference on what I'll show you guys. On the crank side, or on the crankshaft, you'll have these little balls that are pressed in from the factory. They do that so that when it's drilled, then you can keep the oil pressure there rather than it just squirting out, since the mains feed the rod journals on this. But on an aftermarket engine, you typically want to convert that to a plug. So like you guys just saw, a removable Allen plug is put in its place. The ball is removed. That way when you're in the section of assembly, even on refreshes, you can remove those plugs and clean out all of the internals of the crankshaft very easily. You don't have any question of debris sticking in the back of it, and it just makes the whole process a lot easier. We started to spray out some of the crankshaft, and you see a lot of like diluted oil right here. That's what all this foamy looking stuff is. But there are also a few chunks of metal that would otherwise have gone into the bearings as soon as we did a first start. This engine, like we've already talked about, has had a life of abuse. And this is just metal that might have gotten its way into the oil pump or into the crankcase and just over time. So little small pieces of debris, these type of things are the last thing that you want inside of a crankshaft. So now that we're refreshing, it's a good opportunity to clean all of this out. We're at a pretty good spot right now. I've already gone through and cleaned everything up, measured the previous set of bearings that were in the engine, and stacked them up against the clearances that we've been targeting. Everything is looking good for a reassembly as well as a refresh. So talking about the bearings, we did notice some stuff on disassembly. Both the main and the rod bearings are wearing pretty good. They haven't spun or anything, and there's no gouging in them, but you can see that after some abuse, they are starting to wear, as well as some sections have what appears to be debris embedded into the bearing, which is likely due to contaminated oil, either debris going in the turbo since there's no filter in this car and maybe making it past the rings, or something as simple as maybe some dust or debris making it past the filter on the catch can, or even the oil cap when we're doing service on the engine. So that stuff is present. We did take the opportunity to clean everything up as much as possible. We did also take out the hex plugs on the crankshaft, which is extremely important to have on a racing crankshaft for serviceability. We got that all cleaned up, as well as all the oil passages in the block and the oil pump as well. We're gonna go ahead and put in a new fresh set of bearings. Like I said, the clearances that we checked on the bearings are exactly what we were targeting, so we're just gonna go ahead and replicate that on the new set. Everything else is pretty good. I wanted to touch also on the pistons. This is an 89mm stroke engine, so there's a lot of angle on the rod versus some of the D-stroker guys for the high RPM stuff, especially with the super high RPM stuff that we've had through misshifts. And there is a little bit of witnessing on the skirt. It's nothing gouged, it's nothing that you can put a nail on, but it is something that through your eyes you can see. And if we were going to do a long-term overhaul on this engine, maybe it would be a good time to do a nice fresh hone on the engine, get a nice good crosshatch, and maybe even apply an abradable coating onto the piston so we had a very nice fresh seal to start with. Now onto cylinder 3 in particular, we did have that witness mark of the valve contacting the piston, and since it does have a little bit of indent on there, we're just gonna do a light little filing to make sure there's no sharp edges and there won't be any area that might be prone to detonation versus the rest of the piston. So clean that up a little bit. Obviously, since we saw the witnessing on the piston, we wanted to make sure that the head was good or salvageable, since it's a possibility that we had a bent valve. So what we did was fill the combustion chamber with the spark plugs in with some brake cleaner, which is a very thin fluid. You can use other thin fluids as well, but the thinner the better, because that can seep into the area where the valve meets the seat. And we did see when applying some pressured air that there was a little bit of bubbling on each of the intake valves. For the exhaust side, it wasn't really replicating it, so we know that the exhaust side was pretty good, but we did want to go ahead and get the opportunity to replace the intake valves before the next event. So we have 8 intake valves getting put in, and those will give us a nice fresh seal for the rest of the race season. Keep in mind the end goal of this engine in its long term is to make more power, so most of these components will end up being changed after the fact. Maybe down the line I'll be doing something like an aluminum rod and a heavier duty piston, so we're not too worried about giving it a long-term solution for these components right now, as much as we're worried about doing service so we can get back and finish the next few races. At home, if you were doing just a regular service on a race engine, it's a good opportunity whenever everything is apart to look at things like bearings, rings, your crosshatch on the sleeves themselves, and things like valve train like we did today. If you do take your engine apart and you find that your bearings are actually still really fresh and you don't need to replace them, then don't waste some money on it. But things like head gaskets, especially after they've been torqued down and the squish has been made between the mating surfaces, you definitely want to change that. So obviously we're going to be changing the head gasket as well as the copper O-ring on the top of the sleeve. This is going to be a nice fresh engine and should have a good life of more abuse after it's put back together. We're gonna go ahead and start installing the camshafts right now. So these are a set of Skunk 2 Pro 1 camshafts just off the shelf. And something that you might be familiar with seeing on Skunk 2 camshafts is the color to them. So these have obviously been ran for some time, but out of the box, you'll have this very distinct black color on the journal section and a lighter but still dark color on the cam lobes. That actually, I recently found out, is a phosphate coating that Skunk 2 puts onto their camshafts from the factory to promote better break-in procedure as well as to promote better protection during operation. So you will see that there is a difference in color from the lobes to the journals, and that's because of the chill cast procedure and how the metal actually cools down, which allows for adhesion of that phosphate coating at different rates to the different sections of the camshaft. Pretty cool. You'll see some light scoring right here, or maybe scoring is the wrong word. It's more of like a witnessing of that phosphate coating wearing in. There's not any sections where you can grab a nail, and there's not any differences in the actual material, but it's the coating has started to wear in some sections, which it's intended to do since it is a break-in coating specifically. So these camshafts are in great shape. We're gonna go ahead and reinstall them right now. I have all the cam caps, the rails, and the hardware all cleaned up, so we can go ahead and put that into the engine and torque it down nice and even. So I noticed something when I was doing the timing. Everything lined up very well, but when I set it and then started rotating the engine a couple times to actually verify timing and whatnot, I heard this slight tick, 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 something very strange, something that I'm not used to hearing, especially in this engine. So I looked a little closer. I wondered if it was the timing guide behind the sprocket or if it was something belt related. And I looked a little closer and I saw that this keyway, it's a one-piece design on this sprocket and the keyway. There's a little bit of movement from the snout of the crankshaft to the actual keyway on there. And you guys can see this tight shot, it literally has some movement. So if this were an OEM engine that it were running for just regular commuter stuff, this would probably not give you an issue. On a race engine that we're gonna be pushing the limits of ignition timing, high RPM, higher horsepower, more load on the timing belt, all those types of things, you not only introduce the problem of perhaps shearing that keyway off of the sprocket, but even at this level where it just has an additional play, it will more than likely give us a false ignition timing reading. So once this is completely tightened with a damper, it might just clock in one position, and that's our new baseline. But this isn't something that we want to allow in a race engine or in a race program. So I'm going to go ahead and put a replacement on this. There are aftermarket keyways or aftermarket sprockets that feature a longer keyway, and it's probably something that I'll be looking into investing in the future. But for the time being, I'm just going to put a brand new sprocket on there that doesn't allow for any movement on that keyway section. So here's our previous crank sprocket. This is a one-piece design with the keyway pre-made into the actual sprocket itself. This is what's used on the OBD1 Honda B series. You have two timing belt guides, one built-in sprocket slash keyway, and then one keyway that goes for the damper itself. We're gonna switch to an OBD2 style, which is straight through on the center of it. You use two keyways, and we got two brand new Honda OEM keyways. That way it's fresh, there's no indentation or anything. And then one timing belt guide that sits on this side of the sprocket and helps align the belt to the actual orientation that it needs to be. Very important, two brand new Woodruff keys. That way everything is all nice and ready to go. Fresh oil is in the engine, and that pretty much wraps up the refresh. So just to do a quick little recap, we did quite a few things to the engine and some other components on the car as well, just to get ready for this next event that we're going out to Maryland for. So once we tore down the complete engine, we found a few things that we could improve on and things that we could refresh, some of which were the engine bearings. We measured the old clearances with those bearings as well as the new clearances with the new replacement bearings, and everything is still on that target that we were trying to reach. So we're good on there, a nice replacement set there. Head gasket is nice and fresh, as well as the O-rings that go beneath the head gasket to give it a little extra seal above the sleeves. And then the cylinder head got some refresh as well in terms of the valves for the intake side and the valve seats for the intake side. When we measured everything out for the exhaust and did vacuum tests, everything was nice and good, sealing up really well. So we are pretty much fresh on everything that needed to be refreshing. While we were doing some service to the engine, we took the opportunity also to look at some of the transmission stuff and did a little bit of service there as well. And we're all nice and fresh to go into H-Day. Now, obviously, there will be people in the comments asking, if this were me at home, should I follow the same approach of just taking everything apart? The reason that we did a full teardown on this was for two reasons, actually. Obviously, we had a bunch of passes on it, hundreds of passes either on the dyno or on the drag strip, and just altogether has a bunch of wear. It was time for an overhaul of this nature. Another thing that led us to open it is the coolant pressure that started creeping up over time past different drag strip passes. So we started seeing some incremental stuff that needed addressing. And at that point, we knew that there were no catastrophic problems with the engine. It would be more of a refresh, analyze, and fix whatever's, starting to get worn, rather than, oh, the piston broke or oh, a rod got bent or something like that. So if you were approaching this at home and you wanted to do a refresh, you could totally do that as long as the other surrounding components were good. With all the changes that we needed to do for the engine, one of the questions was, are we going to be able to get the parts in time? Luckily, we keep a huge amount of it here at Real Street, so it was as simple as running to the shelf and grabbing it and then putting it on a sales order for me and then be able to put it in the engine. If you're at home and you're wondering if you can do this type of rebuild, the only added delay would be a day or two of shipping. So we ship out worldwide every single day here from Real Street Performance to literally every nation on earth. So if you guys need some stuff, check us out and we can get you some overnight shipping if need be, or even regular couple days carrier stuff. As well as you local guys, come in, the doors are always open Monday through Friday. We're typically here until 6 or 7 p.m., sometimes a little later. So if you guys need some parts, just reach out to us and we'll get you taken care of. We've been doing a lot of K-Series recently, so if you have enjoyed the B-Series switch, please let us know here in the comments below. We haven't done one on the engine dyno yet, but hopefully in the next few months we can get that set up. It takes a little bit of calibration. Engine harness needs to change, the adapter brackets to go onto the engine dyno needs to change, and then calibrating obviously as well. So it'll take some time, but we will definitely do B-Series content on there soon. For the time being, just stick with this old Integra and you can see the B-Series stuff here. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.